What's up, everybody, man? Thank you guys tuning in to another episode of Coach Code Podcast. Excited for today. Got the one and only Mary Murphy in the house. What's going on?
Not much. How are you doing?
I'm good. Recovering, but I'm good.
Awesome.
Yeah, brutal. It was definitely an experience for sure.
Well, that's awesome.
A lot of miles.
Makes it worth it, right?
It does. It sure does. So how are things?
Good. Good, growing. And, it's been really good. It's been a lot, since we first met. I think it was just me, Brian, and Jen.
No, I was thinking about that.
I first met you.
Out of your house, right?
Working out of our house. It was COVID.
Yeah.
So lots have changed in the 3 years since I met you, I think.
It is so crazy. I was thinking about that. It was just the three of you out of the house. Like, what the heck do I, is one of those crossroads, right? Like, what do we want to do? Mm-hmm. And for you, you knew the growth, you wanted the growth to be there. You're ready to put the foot on the gas. And that's what's happened. So kind of bring us through that journey of the growth of the organization, the team, and the things that have happened over this 3-year period.
Yeah. So, when we first met, I was just kind of going out on my own and trying to figure out how to build it. I knew how to sell. I knew how to take listings, and I had a lot of grit, and I would run through walls. So that was really who I was, but I didn't really understand how to grow it the right way. And the leadership part, that's a continuous challenge we all have. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't ever end. Right. So I think back then it was just the three of us. I was the only one in sales. Brian trying to figure out I had already tried to build a team at that point. It was the three of us now, because I had already made a big mess trying to build a team the first time. And now we were starting from scratch, where we were trying to build the foundation in order to be able to build the organization I wanted. And, that's not easy. It's not easy when you have a vision of how an organization should look and how you want it to look and how to support people. It takes a lot to get that built. So that's kind of where we are now. But in 2020, that was just the three of us, Brian building the organization, me still selling, and then starting to find the right people to join us. And it's still me, Brian, and Jen. And now we've gone through a lot of people. We have a really solid group now, but it's still,
Talk about that foundation, because I think this is a big get for everybody that has tried to add people and then it doesn't work, and then tries to add people and it doesn't work. And then you said, no, we got to build a strong foundation. What does that mean? What does that look like?
So at the time, I thought it meant systems. I thought it meant lead sources. And I think what it really means is it does mean those things, but I really think it means you have to build the foundation of being a leader. And so if you've ever really studied leadership, or if you haven't read the book, The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell, you should go and read it. And I probably read it 5 times by now. But you really have to build the foundation of you being a leader and knowing what value are you going to add? Because it's hard enough to lead people, but now we're not just leading people, we're leading entrepreneurs. We're leading independent contractors. They're not on salaries. We can't lean on our position. We're not paying their salary. So I had to really learn, who was it that I thought that I could add value to, who would want the value that I had to add. And then how can I pour into them so that they would do better with me than they would do on their own. So the systems part, although that's a lot, it's labor intensive and it's expensive. That's important, but I think the leadership part is even more important.
I mean, you're speaking my language. So it's the whole concept, no business problems, only leadership problems. And really it's kind of even what Coach Code, even where it even came from, right? It came from a conversation of a belief that I shared that was, I just believe you can't coach and lead another human until you can coach and lead yourself first. And then you can coach and lead others, and then you coach and lead others to lead others. And that's the leaders creating leaders type of belief and value that we're pouring in. And so what does that look like, right? Because leadership is a skill, and anything that is a skill can be developed and grown. And you're right. I mean, it's not one and done. It's like, marketing. You're a lifelong student of marketing. You're also a lifelong student of leadership. And, how are you showing up? How are you modeling that behavior that you want to instill into those around you? And so for you, when you kind of look at it, what was kind of the first big distinction or aha for you when it came to leadership? And it's like, okay, I've got to get this right. I've got to figure this out. I've got to get this dialed in first. Because you made a really good distinction. We are building organizations, building companies, and we do have independent contractors. And so you look at typical, building any other, and you have, people under employment, to where, you're paying an hourly type or a salary wage. So you don't like to use that stick, although it's there, right? In the back of everybody's mind, they're under employment, that it's there. With the contractor, they're just like, I can just do whatever I want. And yet that's not what's best for them. So for you, with that leadership distinction in the beginning, to where it's like, okay, hey, I got to figure this out and lead and create value. What was that for you? What was that initial distinction of, hey, I got to get this right first?
So I think I got it wrong so many times that when I started getting it right, I was like, okay, what did that look like? Because like that didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't look good either. And this person left me, or that person was the absolute wrong fit. What was I thinking? Or Brian and Jen would walk in and be like, what are you thinking? And I always thought, I know how to do this. You can make so much money in real estate. If they just do these things, then they can duplicate what I did. I made $100,000 my first year on a team on a 50-50 split. And if they could just do these things, and you would always say to me, Mary, if they were you, they'd be you. And it took me a long time to understand what the hell you were talking about. Cause I'm like, just do these things, guys. And you start to realize that not everyone is wired the same way, and they won't just do them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I don't know how to figure that part out, but I think just making all the mistakes and hiring the wrong people, and then watching, now I have people that I can say, hey, listen, she duplicated exactly what I did, and she did exactly what I did, and she made more money than me, Sarah, right? Or if you even do half of it, you'll make half of it. So I can kind of see that now. And the distinction, I think, is just, I can't want it more than they do. And I know that's something that everyone kind of always says, but I can just show you. So even now we had a call today, and, June is really the halfway point.
Yeah.
From June 1st, like that's the halfway point of the year. So on our conversation huddle this week, it's been, guys, remember what you said in the beginning of the year, and you're still saying that on these huddles. Are you halfway there? Or does that seem feasible? If not, you have to reevaluate, or you have to increase your activity. You can decrease your goal. I was always taught that you could never decrease the goal, and I don't believe in that. You can decrease your goal if that's what's important to you, but I don't want you to not hit it and be surprised.
Yeah.
Do it with your eyes open. Like, don't tell me you're going to sell 21 houses this year if you're at 0, and then say you're going to make 5 contacts a day. Don't just own it. So I think a lot of it had to do with also figuring out how to be able to mentor people. There's something I listened to recently on a podcast, and it talked about leadership and the different leaders, and I'll go through them. It's super quick, but I was all of these leaders at one point. So the first leader is the absent leader. And that is, there's low connectivity and there's low expectations. You don't care. You're sitting in the back office, door shut, do whatever you want, sink or swim. It doesn't matter. I think we've all had leaders like that. It's not really a leader, right? And then there's the buddy leader. And I've been that, where you just want them to be happy. I'm just going to keep giving them more. And if I give them more and I am kind and all of that, and I don't hold them accountable at all, they'll be happy. So that's a high connectivity, but you have low expectations. They can do whatever they want. The part where I think I failed the most, if I were to go through all my failures, was the, what do they call it? I actually wrote it down. The controlling leader. The controlling leader has high expectations, but low connectivity. And I can be that way, right? I'm a bull. I want to get everything done and just do it. If you just do it this way, you're going to make the money. But I didn't really get the permission to hold them accountable until you really have that connection. So where you have to be as a leader is is really the mentor leader. And that's where you have the high connection. I can say, hey, I know you told me at the beginning of the year that you want your wife to go part-time, and that in order to do that, you had to sell 30 houses. Let's talk about whether you're on pace or not. What does your activity look like? And will you get there? I can hold someone accountable like that because I have the connection. I know why they're doing it.
Yeah.
I know what it would mean for their life. And at the same time, I can say, hey, are you going to get there, or is that not the goal anymore? So that mentor leader is connected, but they have high expectations, and they know they want more for you, and they're going to hold you to the fire. Like, you can do more, you know? So I went through all of those paths, and I would say I kind of started as the controlling leader more than anything else because of my high sense of grit, because I'll just do it. I kind of have a tough exterior, and I had to learn. Then after, I'm like, well, I'm just a pitch all the time. I don't want to be that. Let me just be their buddy.
Yeah.
And I got rid of all accountability.
Yeah.
And that didn't work either. So now this is where I'm trying to find this balance, and I think it is working, but you never stop learning how to be a leader, I guess.
No, you don't. And what you're talking about is just different styles, right? And you just got to go through different styles for different stages. And also, I believe that there's certain times to where you've got to kind of be a little more demanding in certain situations, in certain stages, certain seasons. And so, if you look at kind of the business and life kind of as a river, and understand, sometimes it's the perfect current, right? You can be out there on the raft, the sun's shining, you've got a cold beer in your hand, music's playing. There's times to when it just stops and you're just there. But there's also times when it gets rocky and bumpy, and that takes a different style than when it's all, white picket fence and fairy tales. And so you've got to know how to gravitate to it. And, it's like a peacetime or a wartime general. And so sometimes, the peacetime generals are great, right? But they can't handle wartime. And vice versa. You've got a great wartime general that gets a little antsy, uneasy when some peacetime, and maybe stirs some shit that he probably shouldn't. So it's just, I think that's where, the continuous growth is being able to be aware of the season, be aware of the current, be aware, and how can you, adapt that style or not. And, that's where I think you see certain sizes of certain organizations. They, they're a great fit within what's going on here, but they might not be a great fit over there. And I think that's just through maturity, through time. And no matter what, it's about progress. And you said, hey, I've touched the hot stove so many times, and I believe that's what it is, right? It's the pain plus being able to have an awareness to reflect is what equals progress. So pain and reflection equal progress. And that's really what we're just trying to do. Are we making progress and growing as a leader? What are we learning? How are we progressing? And the beautiful thing, for you is that you're not afraid to trial and error. And I think that's where a lot of people are even afraid to try.
I think that's true. Or I think they don't educate themselves enough. So for me, I'll try and error, but I'll also know when it's not working, and make changes again. And I think that has really contributed to my growth, but it's not always fun.
Yeah.
It's not always fun making the changes, or, and being a great salesperson or being a great agent does not equal being a great leader or building a team. And I think there's a lot of transferable qualities that you get by being a great agent that will transfer over to leadership, but it's another skill, and you really have to develop it. It's not the same. And it's funny because I realized that I used to always say, and still always say, there's really only a few different sellers that I meet. There's only a few different buyers. You meet them over and over again, right? Like, you can go back and be like, I had someone like this before. I had a situation like this before. And then your experience will help you get through it again. And I kind of had to go through that also with building the team. Because you know what? I've heard this excuse before, and I've met this person before that had these lofty goals and then just stopped showing up. Or this person who I know I'm going to have to continuously pour into because it's never going to be enough for them. So it's just, it's exciting though. It's never the same.
No, it's never the same. I think so for you, because you had kind of mentioned, just do it this way, right? Just do it this
Mhm.
way. This is how I did it. Just do it this way. And that's kind of that whole dynamic of the relationship of the window and the mirror. And do it this way. I can see you doing it this way, right? That's kind of looking out the window versus when you in your growth, when you decided to take a good look in the mirror, like what was that kind of, was there any like ahas or moments like, oh shit, right? Like did that really click for you when that kind of that understanding of that relationship?
So, you know what? I guess at first when I was like, do it this way. I mean, I followed a schedule. I made the calls. I would always joke that I would answer a lead call from the shower or the grocery store. Like it didn't matter. I was so hungry all the time. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, they're not going to all be like me. So I can't expect it. So let me just make it so easy. Let me just pay for a ton of marketing. I'll have leads coming in. I'll pass off my database. I'll give them everything. And then at some point I had a bunch of spoiled children and I realized I had to figure out a balance where I'm like, okay, I definitely didn't do it that way either.
Yeah.
So then I had to take another step back, really at the beginning and end of like the beginning of this year, end of last year, when the market changed. And I realized that, it wasn't fruitful like it was before. It wasn't falling out of the sky like it was before. And I don't know that I had really taught how to hunt because I had to hunt. I was never fed. So
Right.
now it's really figuring that part out. So when I look in the mirror, I think, it's like if you grew up poor, now you want to give your children everything and you forget to give them one of the best qualities, which is work ethic. And I think I've almost made that same mistake. So I don't know if I'm answering your question with the door and the window, but really now I'm looking at it and it's like, well, how can I give them a better quality than I had, get them into production faster, lead them better, get people to be in their strength zone and happy and making money while also teaching them they have to hunt. You should be able to do this on your own. If you can do it on your own, if you're strong enough to do it on your own and you join with me, I can help you do it better, faster, and help you make more money and get out of doing the things that you don't want to do. But if you can't do it on your own, no matter how much I provide, you can't do it with me either. It's just not going to work. So that's really the discovery zone I'm in now, is how do we have both?
Yeah. I mean, I think you said something really, really important there, because that's what I was kind of thinking about, is that it also takes the right type of person, because you said something, right? It's hard if they've never had work ethic to be able to instill work ethic into them. It just started flashing. Just remember growing up, I know where my summers were. They were out on the field, moving water pipes, weed eating, mowing, spraying stuff that you can't spray anymore to kill weeds. And then, my dad buying a failing business for my grandma just so she would have something to do. And remember sitting there propped up on a stool, ringing the cash register, selling penny candy, right? Just little things like that you get exposed, that we've been exposed to. And just the constant work. So I think it also takes the right type of person bringing in. So what do you guys look for as kind of that ideal player now? Because I mean, maybe you've experienced this. We in the beginning had a false belief that we could help anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned the hard way that that's not true. They've got to have a certain makeup. They've got to have a certain amount of whatever it is. What is that for you guys? Who are you looking for to be that right fit, that right team player?
It really is that humble, hungry, coachable mindset, right? So you just have to be willing to be, if you're coachable, I could probably even just use that word, just be coachable and willing to do the work. And I know that I can get you there if you also have that hunger. But if you don't, if you're not humble, especially, victim mentality doesn't work in my world. It just doesn't, because I have a lot of empathy, but I also really don't have, just do the work. Like right now we're between two systems, so it's a little bit harder. Our systems are really on point, and now we're doing another system, so it makes it a little challenging. And one of the agents was complaining about the challenge of having to log into these two systems. And I'm like, you know what? It is a little more challenging than it was before, and it'll get better again. But honestly, like, could we be more spoiled? Like, people used to have to use the phone books. And now like you're annoyed that you've got to log into 2 websites. Stop.
Yeah.
So but it is that, and we laughed and they were like, you're right, totally first world problem. And I'll stop complaining about that. So we can be really transparent also on our team. So you have to be willing to fail and have that transparency, because we talk about everything. I am very, very vulnerable and transparent with them, that I can tell them if I fail and I can apologize. So it's created a culture where they will also do that.
I love that.
And so we talk about that a lot. So humble, hungry, coachable, I guess that's really it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're throwing a lot of things out. I think this is great. But I'm hearing a lot of values that you guys live by, right? The shoulds, the should nots. How do we behave? How do we make decisions? Like, what are those values, and how important are they in growing the organization?
Yeah, they're really important. So being self-responsible, collaborative, innovative, and coachable, like those are some of our main ones. Having honesty, high integrity. Yeah. That's all really important. If you instill those things, if they come with those things, then they want to succeed. And they're also wanting to succeed with you. The innovative part is really important for us, because we're always going to make changes. Like, it's never going to be comfortable here. We talked about that from the very beginning. And I say that often, guys, it's never going to be comfortable, because I had to learn that about myself, is that the soonest things are going really smooth and really comfortable and we're in a good spot, I need to do something else. Like, I got to break something. Right. So I'm going to add something. And that's just who I am. And that's going to be the reason why we grow so much. But I won't do good with people who like to stay in their comfort zone, because they're never going to feel comfortable here.
I mean, one of the books that, people coming into the team, one of the books we made everybody read was Who Moved My Cheese? Because it's like, if you can't handle that, then you're not going to work here. And we would joke, it was like, you got to kind of be like Gumby. And you got to be flexible. You got to be able to move. You got to be able to go with it, right? You can call it agile. You can call it whatever you want, but you've got to be able to handle change, because yes, we have a primary objective. We know what we're trying to achieve. However, what are all the ways to get there, right? And I think for us, it was just that mentality is like, okay, here's where we're at. Here's where we want to go. What are all the ways to get there? And can we get there faster? Can we get there cheaper? Can we get there easier, with less bumps in the road, less times, hitting the wall? So I think those are some of the things, but I'm with you. I think, having those core foundational values that people value as well, right, as part of who they are. And then there's some of those key characteristics, those traits, the hungry, the humble, the coachable, right? Believing that they don't have it all figured out, that they're open to learning a better way. And, from Lencioni, from the Ideal Team Player, he has smart. That's kind of that third equation. And I've always equated that to emotional intelligence, and having a high level of emotional intelligence and understanding that component, and being hungry and then humble can be also as coachable as well. And so just looking for some of those key characteristic traits. Do you guys really do how disciplined are you to that interview and initial process to make sure that they have these characteristics before bringing them into your culture?
You know what? I've changed a lot in that way too. Whereas in the beginning, when I was first starting out and building a team, I was really long drawn out interviews. I used this there's all these different systems you can use. And at the time I was with a company, and it was career visioning, and it was 4 interviews and all these personality tests and all this stuff. And me, I'm really not super patient. By the time we got to the end, I'm like, oh my God, well, one, I just made this person go through all this. How do I not hire them now?
Right.
So it's I would go through it all and then hire them all anyway. Yeah. So that didn't make sense. So I'm now I just am hiring this person who's not a fit with my eyes open. That's even worse than hiring them without doing that. Then I went in, it was just oh my gosh, we're so busy. We have so many opportunities, just whatever. Do you have your real estate license? Come join us. We can help you be successful. And now it's kind of a mix of that, where I want to get to know them and understand if they're a nice person. Are they someone that I'd be okay spending time with? Do I want to talk to them? Or there's been times where I've had people, and when my phone rings and I see their name, I'm like, I don't want to answer it. I don't have that now. There's not one person on my team that if they give me a call that I don't want to pick it up. So do I like them? Do they seem like they have those qualities? And then really it's that test. So it's that test in the beginning. And we went from everybody being equal and round robin and it all being like fair and kumbaya to now it all being earned. And I'm very honest about the earned. It's like, there is no round robin here. Like, we're building a business. This is a business. And those of you that treat it that way, that convert and that are willing to put the time in, are going to be treated differently than those who don't. Your goals are your goals. And I don't have any judgment around your goals. And in fact, we have part-time agents on our team and we're okay with that. They're not going to get treated the same. So the agents that are the top producers, that are the highest converters, are treated that way.
Yeah.
And there can't be any competition. In the past, there was, because it was like, oh, you have favorites. I'm like, I do. Yes. They are my favorites. They show up every
It's like our
day.
kids, right?
They
We might
do
not
the
want to
work.
have a favorite kid, but we do have a favorite kid.
Yes. Like, I do have favorites. They do the work. They're converting. They're making me money. And every time I see you, you complain. Like, you're not my favorite, right? So now that's kind of another thing too, is that, so I kind of get to know them on the interview, and I do ask some questions. The questions are all the interviews before. I think I spent a lot more time talking about the value that I would add. And now I spend a lot more time in the beginning getting to learn about them as a person before I go into how do I know what value I can add? You think everybody wants the same thing and they don't. So you have to understand what they want. And then if what they want matches with what I can give them, it's a good fit. And if it doesn't, then it's not. And that's okay too. So that changed a lot too over the years.
I think too, it goes back to kind of the season of where we're at in our business. What resources do we have available that can pour into certain types of people? And, I challenged you with this as well. And it's like, do you want to bring in brand new agents? If you do, what does that mean, right? What's the ripple effect? If I say yes to this, what's the secondary impact? What does that mean? If you bring brand new agents, then you better have great training. You better provide some leads because they don't know how to go generate leads. You better provide some support, some structure. You better provide some therapy, right? You better provide the things to help brand new agents to be successful. So I think it's really, really being intentional and based upon kind of what resources you have available to who you want to have on the team. And there's so many different ways, right? And if you love production, if you're in production, you can build the team to just be highly leveraged, right? A highly leveraged team. You maybe have some admin support, leveraging, VA support. Then you've got maybe somebody helping you do showings. You've got somebody maybe at some point making calls and nurturing sales development stuff for you, as long as you're kind of that key figure in the production role. And then as the seasons and the stages, maybe you're like, I want to back out of production a little bit. Well, that's going to look a little bit different as well. And maybe the type of individuals a little bit different as well. And some of their history and some of their experience is going to be important. So there's just so many ways to go about it. But I think you're right. I mean, it definitely starts with you, and it starts with you being intentional with, and also I think, like you said, being authentic, being genuine, being truthful with yourself. Like, this is what I'm really good at. This is what I'm not. And I want to put all of my energy and effort on what I'm great at. And then I'm just going to create leverage and surround myself and complement myself with what I'm not. And I think even back to, 3 years ago, right? You had that key foundation with you. And then it's being able to build from there and really leaning into your strengths, and then allowing, the key people around you to grow into their strengths as well.
And that's really our value proposition here too, is that everyone just be in their strength zone and let everyone else be in, that you will have the leverage. But one of the conversations I had with my team the other day too, is that you guys have all the leverage in order for you to be in your strength zone, which is with people, talking to buyers and sellers, doing open houses, negotiating. That's your strength zone. That's what you told me you want to do. But the leverage can't be luxury. right? Because you can't have all this leverage if you're not actually then doing the things in your strength zone. And even as leaders, sometimes we can lose that, where you get all this leverage, you have all these people doing all these things for you. And it's like, well, then what am I doing to make sure that I'm continuously driving the needle forward? Because as I leverage myself, I decrease my profitability every time. So that's okay, as long as I'm increasing my gross commission, right? As long as I'm increasing the top line, then I can do that. But you can't do it. You can't do both. You can't
Right.
get all of this leverage because at one point you were a great agent and then back out of production. And now you have all these people and all these expenses. And I think I see a lot of leaders doing that the wrong way. And even personally, you know, we ran everything on me at a split like that an agent would be at. So if we ran everything for me as a 50-50 split, well, when we got to this level, I could back out of production. Well, so I did that for like 2 seconds. We started doing that. I'm like, okay, wait, we're actually at a point I could start doing less production, right? Well, then you also have to take into account that if you do less, what does that look like? So I was the main listing agent, right? So if I do less and the listings bring open houses and they bring buyer sales, also I'm really highly capable of converting these. I'm going to get the appointment if I go on it. Well, now I'm like, well, as long as someone else does this at 50%, we're good. Well, I forgot the fact that maybe that's going to go down to 10%.
Yeah.
So
Or
we had to learn that the hard way too. And then the market changes and that throws a whole thing in there, right? You don't control that. So it's like, shoot. So that's the whole being Gumby.
Yeah.
That's the whole being Gumby. You have to go back and figure some stuff out. So we've had a lot of that. I don't expect that will ever change. It's always going to be, you know, this seems great. Let's do this. Let's do this. Then you crash into a wall and you're.
Yeah. You know, it's the, you think that, I think sometimes it's that false, well, they can do it just as well as I can. And it's like, they're not trained well enough to do it as well as I can. Because if, you know, what happens if they get to that skill set like you, they might be out the door, you know, doing something else, you know, and not riding with you anymore. So we have to be careful of that for sure. But I also think, you know, kind of especially the point that you're at and to the point you're making, and this happens, you get to a certain point, more doors start to open. And so you've got to be really intentional. And like you said, is this opportunity going to increase the overall transactional value that the company gets to keep? Right? Because there's that commission that's going out to the agent. Yeah. And then we also have the salary support, but is the overall value, right? That's where the transaction fees, that's where making sure you're not, you know, being pressured down on commission. You know, that's where your vendor opportunities start to open up, the affiliate relationships and the other opportunities that, like I said, you get into that point, you know, you get some market share, you've got a lot of mind share in the marketplace. Those doors are there, and you got to know how to make sure to open them, but also how to really extract the value that's there so you can increase the top line, but also protect the bottom line within the business.
That's such a big thing to talk about too, because if you can't also get so attached to that bottom line number that you are still out there doing things that you should be leveraging. Right. So it's like two different things. Like I know that my time is not best spent showing houses. Right. My time is not best spent doing that now. I have agents on my team. That's where their time is best spent. That's their highest dollar per hour activity right now, but it's not mine. Because if I'm doing that, I'm going to lose all of them. So it's just understanding, like you said, what opportunities are the right ones to take. And then also when you take it, holding that accountable, because just because you say yes to something doesn't mean you have to stick with it because of your ego or any other reason. If you say yes to something and it's not working, you got to be able to then pull the cord.
It's the exit clause. Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing we had to look at.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that's where a lot of, especially people that believe that we can figure anything out, right? It's better to have that exit clause in the beginning and be like, hey, let's date for a while, right? Let's give it a good 90-day commitment. Let's date. And then let's revisit the conversation in 90 days. Was it what we expected? Do we not want it to be? Right. But I think it's easier to do those things in the beginning instead of not having the conversation. You get 90 days in, you're like, this ain't working. Like, and then it's a tougher conversation. But if you go ahead and preset the agreement that, hey, we're going to date for 90 days. We're going to see how it goes. This is the agreement. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. Let's see if that's true. 90 days, we can revisit it. If it's everything that we thought, then we'll keep trucking. Maybe let's run 9 months with it and then reevaluate in a year. But I think it's, being okay when you get into those opportunities. And the biggest opportunities comes with your lenders, comes with your title, comes with, who you're feeding. And I think that's one of the things that especially a lot of agents have a hard time to realize, but it's like, you're spending money, you're spending your time, your energy, your sanity to acquire these clients. And then you're okay with just giving them to somebody to make money off of. They didn't do anything to earn those opportunities, and you're just giving it to them. What did it cost you to acquire this? And what is it costing them to acquire it? And I think once that light switch goes off, they're like, hey, wait, hold on a minute. I'm spending all of this money to get this business and I'm just giving it to you. Yeah. Is that a good relationship? No, it's a bad relationship. And it's a relationship that resentment grows if you don't, get to a point to where you can have that conversation to where there has to be a fair trade-off, right? And fair doesn't mean 50-50. We just need a good, solid, fair relationship that makes sense for both of us.
Well, we should be looking at everything like a partnership, right? So look at like a partnership with my agents, a partnership with my vendor partners, everything. Listen, I provide this and you provide that. And what is that valuable? Is that a win-win for us all? So if you look at everything in win-win scenarios, I'm a servant leader. I'm okay doing most of it. I'm okay not being 50-50. I'm okay being 70% all in, but there still has to be something that you're giving me back. And so it has to be a partnership with vendors or with anybody. So that's the way I really look at it now. And I've had to give myself permission not to take everything on my shoulders. Because when you're also self-responsible, that was a really big lesson I had to learn, is that I'm so highly self-responsible that everything's my fault. But if everything's my fault, it's never anyone else's fault. And so you're actually giving permission for people to be victims if you're always taking all the blame on. So now I've had to learn how to look within and see, what could I have done differently or better to make the situation better? And then did I have enough expectations? And then what expectations did I have in place that you should have done, my partner or whoever it is that I'm talking to? So that's another we probably do a whole podcast just about learning that, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
the vendor partnerships is important. And I think understanding that it is a partnership and you don't have to give everything. It's valuable to have to be partners with me and have a part of my business.
Sure. Yeah.
And I spend a lot of money on it. And so there's going to have to be some partnership there. And we talked about that together. I remember when I first looked at it like that, because I didn't before.
Yeah.
I just want them to be good.
Well, I mean, I think that's a table stake, right? I think like they have to, and I've really been on this, how are we over promising and how are we over delivering? And how are we aligning and protecting the experience that clients have with us? And so this is the other thing as real estate agents, especially, it doesn't even matter if you're building a team and not a team, a leverage team, massive team, whatever, it doesn't matter. You've got to focus on the overall experience that somebody is having with you. And so that's why it's critical to align with certain vendors and affiliates who understand that, want to overpromise and overdeliver that experience, because it's the lifetime value. I mean, it's just, that's so critical, because most people getting into this game, I mean, how many are checking out? Very few are checking out in the next, few years. Most are going to be hanging around for a while. So think now, how frequent homes turn over, and, are you going to be in the game for how many of those cycles? And so why not be able to extract the ultimate value from that, especially if you're in the game for 10 newer people get in, maybe 20 years, 10, 15, 20 years. Somebody moves 3 to 4 times during that time frame, plus family members that they can refer you to. Like, what's the real value of that client and that experience? And so you don't want some whatever vendor just drop the ball and create a horrible experience for you to miss out on extracting all of the value from that relationship. So,
And like you said, there's prerequisites, right? Like there's expectations. So if we were going into the vendor relationship, like the expectation is that you're the best in the industry. The expectation is you're going to get back, you're going to be responsive, you're going to make my clients happy and give great customer service. If you're that, then we can have a conversation about what a partnership with us would look like. If you're not that, then there's nothing.
no.
Now, if you're all those things, then we're going to talk about partnership and what that looks like. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing with our agents. It's the same thing with really anyone we're in business with, is that we have to have standards, and you've got to hold them really close. Because if you ever, and I've done this more times than I wish I had, if you ever sway from your standards, you try and think like, I can help this person, I can save this person, I can, whatever you think, and you bring them into your world, it's like a cancer that will spread through your whole world if you don't hold true to your standards. And now I know that's probably one of the best things that I've learned, is that I know that I have to hold true to those standards, and they're the prerequisite.
Yeah.
They're just the prerequisite. And that's that humble, hungry, coachable.
It is. And it's just one of those things, right? And I'm so glad you said it. It does come down to the standards. I mean, it's the overarching to everything. And what we have to remember is that, are we in those standards? Because, the only the only standards we have are the standards we enforce. So if you say, hey, our minimum standard to be here is XYZ client satisfaction, XYZ, effort, XYZ in attendance, XYZ in production. But the second that you waver and you come a little bit lower, that is truly what your standard is.
Right.
So that's as from a leadership perspective, that's where, that you hold tight to that no matter what. And that's, you also leading by example, which is the number one prerequisite of any type of leadership, is leading by example, modeling the behavior that we want to instill into those around us. And so I think, Mary, that, it is a lot of hats, a lot of things that we're juggling. But if you can really get that skill and really continue to become a continuous student of the leadership skills and capabilities, it changes everything. I mean,
it does. And I think you have to look at your own standards too. I think that's one of the things it's a mistake I made too, was that you read a book, you find someone else's, pro forma or whatever, and you're like, okay, so the standard is this. And so that's the standard I'll adopt. But if it's not yours, if you don't love it, own it. Like if that's not how you feel, it doesn't transfer over. Like I remember in the beginning, I was told that every agent on the team had to sell 2 houses a month or they couldn't stay on the team. So that was the standard. But now I'm like, well, can I help someone who wants to sell less?
Yeah.
Can I help a teacher who only wants to sell a couple houses a year? Will I add value to her? And would she add value to my team by being a part of it? And my answer is actually yes to that. As long as they're a core value fit, they're allowed to be a part of my team. They're not treated like the full-time agents. We actually call it fully supported and fully committed, and they know they're different. And that's okay. I can still add value to that part-time agent, that mom or that agent who has a full-time job. I can still add value to their life. So they don't have to be in this little box. But it took me a long time to figure out what that looked like for me. And I realized that my standards are more around the person and around them being honest with what they're going to do. They can sit down with me and say, Mary, I want to sell 6 houses. This is how I'm going to do it. Can you support me? And I will say yes. I don't like the person who says I'm going to sell 40 and does the work to sell 6.
Correct.
So that's kind of that. And, that took a long time to get to. The last thing, and I'm sure we're probably at time or wherever we're supposed to be, but it's your environment. Who are you surrounding yourself with? You can't have conversations like this with everyone. You and I could sit on here all day and have this conversation.
True.
Right? But there's not a lot of people that I could have this conversation with at this level. And so you have to be really careful about who you have conversations with. It matters.
It does. It matters so much. It really does. And this, environment drives everything, and environment drives the way you think, right? And the way we think over time is what forms our beliefs and drives how we feel about things. And then it's just how, the action or no action we take and, ultimately gets us the results or whatever the result is that we're getting. But it all starts with environment and circumstance, and it's so powerful to really protect that. And who you allow into that precious circle of energy and time and capacity that we have. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it is
how you take that experience, right? So you're the one who taught me, you told me about The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan. I always knew that I had to be in the rooms with the bigger thinkers. So the second I get into the middle of the room, I'm jumping to a bigger room, right? So I always want to be the small guy in the room. And what I did turn myself into was someone who was always living in the gap. So if you haven't read The Gap and the Gain, it's that you're always comparing yourself to the ideal. So if you're selling 150 houses a year and you're in a room with everyone selling 2,000, you kind of feel like a loser sometimes. So it's like, you have to understand measuring yourself of where you were yesterday and appreciating where you are today while striving to where you're going tomorrow. And it's a hard balance. Like, that's not one that I can say I've mastered yet, but it's one that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where it starts, right? We're incapable of making change without an awareness. And so, whatever that is, that group, that book, that podcast, that conversation that allows you to create that awareness, that's where it starts. And, get challenged, right? Get in those rooms, get around those people, those bigger thinkers that are going to create that awareness for you. And then it's like you said, is that something I'm willing to commit to? Right. It's like you get in, you're like, oh, I got to do 2,000 transactions. How come? What's the reason behind that? Is that really the goal? Do you really want that? Do you understand what that means? Let's unpack that for a second. And then, is that something you're willing to commit to? It's just like what you said, hey, I want to sell 40 homes. Okay. But do you understand what that means? Do you understand what you have to do, every month, every week, every day for that to be true? And are you willing to commit to those required actions and the amount of those required actions for that to be true? And I think that's where a lot of people mess up, and they don't take the time to kind of back it all out and what they have to do on a daily basis within their control to make that true. Because a lot of people, if you did take them through that and they looked at it and they're like, no, I'm not willing to commit to that. Okay, cool. Well, what are you willing to commit to? And let's start there.
And what would it mean if you hit it? Because you just say an arbitrary number. And for me, it's always, I'm a competitor. That's just who I am by nature. So for me, I'll pick a big lofty goal and I want to hit it. And it's because I don't always know why. And a lot of times throughout the years, I didn't know why. It was just like, because I'm going to be the best. I'm going to do that because that's what the best do. But the thing is, it's not what the best do. You're always going to find someone who's doing it better, faster, bigger. And you also don't know what their world looks like. Right. You don't know that the person selling 2,000 houses a year is losing $100,000 a month.
Right.
Like, that might actually be true. And you don't know that while you're striving to do that, you don't know what that world looks like. So instead of comparing yourself to someone else who you don't really know, you have to decide why you want to do it. And it's not the same as your big why, because I hate that actually, but it's, what does your life look like if you do it? Right. What does your life look like for the work ethic that you have to put in to do it? And what does your life look like when you hit it? So that's a whole nother thing that I had to really learn, is that it's not ego. As much as you can say, I don't have an ego, we all have egos. It's not ego. What does my life look like if I hit that goal? And will it change me to the point where that's a goal that I want to strive for? Right. And so when an agent says 40 houses a year, well, that's going to make me, $200,000. If I make $200,000, I can pay off my student loans. I can buy a new house. Great. Let's do the work to do that. Right. But don't say I want to sell 40 homes because she sold 40 and I'm as good as her. That doesn't matter if you don't need to do that. So it's understanding what your life looks like during the process and when you hit it, and then make the decision and the commitment. Yeah, it is. I love it. Mary, you're amazing. Appreciate you carving out the time, jumping in and catching up a little bit. It's always great connecting with you. It is. I'm happy to be here, and it was fun. My favorite topic. Always. Awesome. Appreciate you guys. And we'll catch you guys on the next show. See ya.